this video, let's discuss the build of the body and the soul and how they relate to each other. We'll discuss the body's abilities and which spiritual aspect it already has within it. We'll explain what the soul is. We'll talk about the components of the body and the soul, how the soul relates to the body, and the struggle of the soul-body relationship. So stage one, the body's abilities are pretty much what we all know. We can walk, run, talk, we can eat. But what about things like thinking, feeling, getting emotional? Are those abilities of the body, or perhaps do they come to us from our soul? In a small town, Liadi, some 200 years ago in old Tsarist Russia, the great sage R Shneur Zalman Borchovitch was approached by thousands of people for advice in their daily lives and some spiritual guidance. There became a point where so many people were coming over to him for his guidance and advice, so he decided to put it all into a book, a compilation of all of his advice and guidance for these seekers of spirituality and growth. As he explicitly writes in the introduction of this book, because time no longer permits to reply to everyone individually on his particular query, I have therefore recorded all the replies to all the questions to be preserved as a sign and to serve as a reminder in everyone's minds. No longer will one need to press for a private audience, for in these one will find tranquility for his soul and true counsel on everything that he finds difficult in his service of God. Now, I happen to have a copy of this book right here in my shelf, so let me pull it out. In the first chapter, it talks mostly about our human psyche and all of our human desires, and how, in fact, our body has some sort of animalistic spirit which allows us to have human desires and temptations. But this animalistic spirit of ours is human in the end, so we do find that seeking things like human relationships and being nice to our surroundings. Some of us just like being nice and kind to people around us. And at times, this can demand some serious self-sacrifice. Now, this is part of our human nature, and it's part of this animalistic spirit which we have within us, which is a mixture of good and bad. It's not completely bad and selfish. Although it's true, most of the things we do as humans, we have something in it for ourselves at the end of the day. But this all comes to us from our animalistic soul, which we have within us. But we also have a selfless and godly soul, which seeks only goodness and purity. Chapter 2 of the book I was just telling you about before, which is, by the way, called the Book of Intermediates, which pretty much means a book for the average person like me and you, which comes to teach us how we can connect to the deepest part of ourselves and find meaning in this vast universe, and how we connect with everything around us. And by the way, this book adopted the name Tanya, in case you were going to look it up. And this all brings us into part 2 of this video, where we will discuss the spiritual, pure, and godly soul. The godly soul doesn't seek self-pleasure. Its only desire is to connect to its source. It recognizes that on its own, it's nothing special. And that's what makes it so special. It truly recognizes its purpose, and its only desire is to fulfill its mission in this world. It's pure, sincere, and truthful with itself and all its surrounding. The soul's desire is to connect with the truth of itself, which really is just the truth of everything and everyone around it, to uncover and express the goodness and kindness within everything. It doesn't see bad in anyone, just how to uncover the goodness within everything. But can the soul communicate its desires to us? It seems like only the animalistic soul takes power and control over our bodies. Do we ever do something truly sincere? We'll have to save all this for another time, but for now, the soul is described as a part of God. Now, God is infinite and has no parts, so what does it mean that the soul is a part of God? Well, what it means is she's unified with God and feels and experiences only goodness, kindness, and this infinite purity all the time within her source, God. So that's what the soul is in short, but it's a very deep topic, and we'll have many more videos going into it, and we'll be speaking about it. So make sure you're subscribed to stay in the loop. So is that the soul inside us giving us life? Well, yes, but it's not so simple. The soul goes through a series of transformations and filters which prepare and program her to be able to come into a human body and infuse it with life. At this point, even after all these filters and transformations, she's still one and part of God, but now imagine her like an astronaut inside a bodysuit, which protects her from the spiritual void of this universe. In fact, this cover and suit is our body. The body and the animalistic soul absorb all the selfishness and lowliness of this world, and the soul stays pure and protected. pure and protected in the sense that her desires remain sincere and good. But if we keep absorbing all the pleasures and temptations the world throws at us, then we start burying our soul deeper and deeper within our body's concealment, till, in some cases, we can no longer hear her anymore. So it turns out everyone has a spark of goodness deep within them. Just for some, she is so deeply buried and hidden within. If we just awaken that soul to come out and shine, everything will change for the better. We really need to talk more about this. But we need to move on to part 3 of this video to explain how the soul operates within us and sends us her messages. We'll have another video talking about how to uncover the good deep within everyone. And now for part 3, which also happens to be chapter 3 of Tanya, the book I was speaking about before. Both the animalistic and the godly soul have 10 spiritual potentials and abilities. They're generally split into 2 groups, the intellectual and the emotional. The intellectual are the first 3, and the following 7 are the emotional, which are born from the intellectual, and we're going to be getting into that in the following videos. The intellectual parts of the soul understand its interests to spread truth and sincerity to its surroundings. These concepts then create emotions and feelings which later influence us to act in ways of goodness and kindness in this world. Our animalistic soul works the other way around. First, it experiences things in the world, and then it gets emotionally connected and interested in them. After experiencing worldly pleasures, it develops temptations to people, food, or anything else it desires. Eventually, we rationalize these temptations and desires in the intellectual faculties of the animalistic soul. And now for part 4, how the soul relates to the body. The soul's relationship with the body can be split into 2. On a general level, here the soul gives us life but doesn't get involved into our daily comprehension and interests of things in this world. Here the soul shines with all its beauty and sincerity. The second, where the soul conceals its true beauty and sincerity to participate and get involved in our daily lives. It first conceals itself into our minds, into our intellectual faculties, where we understand its pure wishes and ideas, but just in the form of limited logic. Then it is drawn even further into our emotions, where it is concealed even more. Emotions require more concealment of the soul since they don't accept the pure ideas of the soul as true. Instead, they have to be interpreted in human temptations and desires. But we'll get into the details about this in another video. Our soul dwells in our minds, and our animalistic soul dwells in our hearts. But both the godly and the animalistic have intellectual and emotional abilities. The soul and the animalistic have very different interests and desires, and this brings us into part 5 of this video, the struggle of the body and the soul. The soul would like us to use our minds for real and sincere purposes. Our body, though, wants to enjoy itself and rationalize those temptations in our minds. And thus, the question becomes, what will we choose with our power of free will? Will we allow the body's temptations to take over us, or will we bring the soul's desires into fruition? But we're running out of time. So in the next video, we're going to discuss the intellectual faculties of the soul, and in the video after that, we're going to discuss the emotions, and in later videos, we will be talking about how to bring the 2 together, so make sure you are subscribed